Welcome to the Act ASAP podcast. Before we begin today's interview with Colonel Trey Morriss, the author of Doom 34, I need to share a quick story. Trey and I had an outstanding conversation on leadership, communications, trust, endurance, and preparedness. Unfortunately, in a very human moment, I forgot to hit the record button and didn't catch it until about 40 minutes in. Now, I could have just scrapped the entire interview, but that would ignore one of the biggest lessons I teach every day. Plans do not work. Prepared leaders adapt. That moment became a real life example of something I talk about often. When disruption happens, the mission does not stop. You adjust and keep moving forward. Fortunately, I captured the later portion of our conversation on video and the entire interview in transcript form. What you're about to watch is the recorded portion of the conversation. And I can tell you this, there is tremendous value in what Trey shares. I'll also be bringing back Trey for a focused part two, where we will dive deeper into Doom 34 and the leadership lessons that every leader can apply today. Now let's begin the conversation. This is Act ASAP. Getting back to what we were talking about, and I feel so bad because we have such a good conversation going on here. Um, it's all culturally indigenous. Everything we revolve around our culture, and depending on what culture we're in, it either raises or drops, or sometimes it's just a roller coaster ride.
Yeah, it certainly is. And matter of fact, I had a conversation today with one of our lieutenant colonels who just joined our team in the front office of the Mighty Eighth. And he kind of asked me, "Sir, is there a continuity folder?" And I said, "Nope." And he asked me why. And I said, "Because we don't operate well in this environment. So it's a cultural choice with a standard operating procedure manual. It changes every day. We are an operational NAV, so you can imagine with everything that happened with Epic Fury over the last 60 days and whatever's going to happen tomorrow doesn't always follow a standard operating procedure. And to the point you made earlier, I don't have time to go looking through the binder of, well, how am I supposed to do this? So it's a pickup game every day. Now, the important things of administrative um, actions on decorations and performance reports, that all we have procedures for. But just day to day, how we run when we show up at 7 in the morning and we leave at 6 in the evening, that's a pickup game. And people may be shocked,
Right.
but it comes back to that team cohesion. You being a drill sergeant and having your other team there with you, and also your basic recruits. There's a lot of dynamic stuff there happens every day that you don't have a manual that shows you how to take care of that. You just know from experience.
Well,
And
you mentioned earlier about how a lot of industry is not outsourcing, but doing distance working,
yeah,
working from
remote,
home, working
yeah,
on Zoom,
teleworking.
remote work, telework. So, how does the teamship relationships work in that type of environment when you're not really even talking to anybody on a regular basis?
It really is incumbent upon the supervisor or the leader in that case to really set up times where they're either having, I call it the Hollywood squares, where you end up having a lot of squares on your screen, or you interact with the team together. And then, depending on company budgets, and we do this in the military, is we will come and have retreat-like meetings where we do have everybody in the same physical spot once or twice a year. In the military, excuse me, in the military, we do it more like 4 times a year
Right.
with various conferences or senior leadership conferences where we do bring everybody to the same location and we get to put a handshake to the name. We already had the face to the name. Now we get to put the handshake to the name and the face and really and we spend some time after hours, and sometimes we'll do this for like 3 or 4 nights for a whole week. Back to relationship building. It keeps coming back that it's got to be more than just emails and phone calls. There are times where you have to have physical interaction with your teammates so that they learn your heart. That's another thing. You got to understand your heart, because there are going to be times where you have to shut the door and start the
Mhm.
conversation off with words like, "Hey, this is going to be hard," or or not. And you just, but they have to understand it's not personal. They understand, hopefully that, you still have a relationship and interest in them as a person. But whatever this hard conversation is about to take place is fair, transparent, and has truth to it.
Well, isn't it easy to do that if you've already set a foundation for that, as
Yes.
opposed to suddenly sideswiping somebody with it? You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. And again,
yes.
that's that investment we've talked about a little bit earlier, that it is incumbent upon everybody to spend some time on in that investment piece. And it's
So
two
what
ways.
do you say about what do you say about the person who's afraid to open their mouth, who has something they want to say? They feel like it's very important. It's just like they're chomping at the bit, but they're not going to say anything. What do you tell that person?
That one's a difficult, and I'll provide the answer goes like this. It comes back to understanding them a little bit before you really yank them into the group sometimes.
Mhm.
Obviously, if I don't know that person really well, I'm not going to do that in a group setting, because that really puts them back on the heels. But there's nothing wrong with bringing them into a private setting and helping them understand their value. Usually, that the reason that people don't want to speak up is either they're not sure they're going to be correct and they don't want to be wrong, or they don't feel like what they have to say has value to it. Usually it's one of those two things. Now, there's
Right.
probably many more, but I think if you had to boil it down, you're going to cover 90% of the why they don't speak up is usually those two things. And so they really need to understand primarily that they have tremendous value in the organization, or you wouldn't have hired them anyway. You wouldn't have brought them in there. And that's does take a little bit of time. And you have to pick up on the cues. People will use words like, "Oh, I'm just a," and I call that the justa. They've already denigrated themselves by using words that devalue themselves. So as leaders, you got to pick up on the body language and the word choice to understand, are they not participating because they don't feel like they have something of value to say? And then
Well, like you said, you hired the person because you thought they were of value somehow.
yeah.
So it seems like that person might not perceive that value internally.
Hmm.
So therefore, it's up to the leader to distill that into that person that they
Yeah.
can open mouth. And even if it is a stupid question, who knows? It might be a fun question anyway. You know,
Yeah.
let's ask it.
And we call that crew resource management in the aircraft. Is you will
Okay.
have personalities in a crew aircraft and a combat crew aircraft that may have that vital piece of information that's either going to make the mission successful or keep you from getting killed. And they have a personality, or maybe a devalued look at themselves that they don't speak up. So
Right.
so that again comes back to that culture setting of uh, of helping everybody understand there's an expectation. You are part of the team. If it's a 6-person team, you're 1/6 of the team. You're not, 100th of the team, and everybody else makes up the rest of the math. You are an equal part of that team, and you have value, and you are expected to speak up. And
I
so
remember as a drill sergeant, many times I would have a young trainee, which we
yeah.
can't call them trainees anymore, who would devalue themselves. And I'd have to look at them and say, look, you have an opportunity. Here now, you have an opportunity to step away from whatever it is you think made you who you are. Here's
Hmm.
an opportunity to become a new person. And we can do that within industries and businesses. Because, like you said, I'm just, that's where
Yeah.
we are narrowing ourselves down to a little box somewhere.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
let's open that box up and I'm just going to crawl out of it or something,
Mhm.
you know?
And I think it also takes a little bit of honesty in a leader. Even if you see, um, first of all, I like to get with my airmen, especially the ones that feel a little bit introverted to me, and ask them, what do you want to do with your life? Where do you want to go? And usually they have pretty big dreams.
Right.
And I'll encourage them that if they feel like there's some qualities they see in other people in their inner circle that they want to borrow from that person, steal it. It's okay to reinvent yourself in some areas. I'm not saying become somebody you're not, but if you feel like, for example, you don't enunciate well, that's a little bit of a reinventing yourself. You go out and you work on your speaking skills. And the list goes on. If you feel like um, I have like I've got a Southern twang, right? A little bit of Arkansas twang. Yeah. And sometimes I'll do a little bit of inner talk with myself and like, I don't like that, and the gray, whatever. People do that to themselves. So I help them understand it's okay to reinvent yourself in some areas if that's going to get you to the goal of what you want to do in life.
So what you're saying though, this also builds trust by being able to communicate with these
Yeah.
individuals, either it's superiors or subordinates. You're gaining trust with them and allowing them to open up and become who they really are.
Yeah.
And so they can actually shine that light because we all have a light. We need to shine it somewhere.
Mhm.
There's enough darkness out there. We don't need to bring more into the world. So how does how do you see yourself moving forward? What do you got coming up? Anything new and exciting? You're writing a new book, a play, a musical, or anything like that? What do you got going on that you're looking forward to pulling off?
Well, that's the question I have not been asked. So I've done quite a few podcasts in so far to date, and so I do have some coming up that I'm excited about. That probably I can't say a lot about those just yet, but um, still doing a lot of Doom 3-4 book promotion again via podcasts. There is a screenplay writer looking at the book right now to do that. And so we'll see where
Mhm.
that goes. So there's a few of those little nibbles out there that are exciting that go along with the book and that story. Um, I have kind of started tinkering around with an outline for next book. Don't tell my wife, um, because Doom 3-4 is the result of getting up at 4:30 in the morning for 18 months straight before I went to work. And and
Okay.
and again, that's the pain behind the platform. It was
Well,
a
then that's the discipline behind it. That's what
yeah,
it was discipline. And
yeah,
even though it might have been painful, if you were disciplined enough to do it
yeah.
and you succeeded at it. So those of you listening out there who have something you want to do, be disciplined and you'll get it done.
And honored to tell that story. I mean, again, it's not all my story. It belongs to the other 57 airmen that flew along with me, and they have embraced it. We just did our 35th reunion at Dayton at the National Museum of the United States Air Force. They're right there in the museum under the B-52. Great venue. Just did that a few weeks ago. But then, yeah, I've got some of that stuff on the horizon. I'm working more in the direction of keynote speaking. That's really my heart. I love making an impact with people, and I think here I am in my almost my mid 60s, and so I think with my last few earning years, I can make the most impact in people's lives by keynoting in front of people in larger groups, and that's really my heart, and that's what I'm striving to get to right now.
All right, that sounds like a good plan, and I'm quite
Yeah.
sure you're disciplined enough that you're going to make that thing happen there. So, I hate to say we should start closing up here because I was so remiss about recording, and I admit it,
Uh,
sometimes things just don't work right. Fortunately, I'm transcribing this whole thing here. So,
okay.
so a quick question here. I mean, we were young when we went in the military, but something drew us into it. What made you decide to join the military, especially the Air Force, and become the navigator?
Oh yeah, so I did have family influence. I do talk about it in Doom 3-4. I had a great uncle that was a gunner on a B-17 in the 8th Air Force, and I had a grandfather who flew B-24s for the 15th Air Force in World War
Okay.
III, and later B-29. So I had those heroes in my family, and then a Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force uncle, and then and I forgive me, what is an E8 in the Army? Sergeant Major?
It's a master sergeant.
Oh, still Master Sergeant. Okay. So I
Yeah.
had an uncle that had two Vietnam tours, also that served in the Army. So I did have this military connection, and my parents and my grandmother, we all had jobs that were either public service jobs or customer facing jobs, or running companies. My father was the editor of the local newspaper in his entire career, so I got to see how he really cultivated relationships. So there's a lot of these influences like that that created a spirit of me of wanting to do something that was bigger than myself. I became this big dreamer even as a youngster. Um, and so through matching the aviation with big dreams, just drove me over to the United States Air Force.
Well, that sounds good. And you already had the bomber experience, so
Yeah,
to speak, in the family. You know,
yeah,
I definitely picked up on that one. So that does make total sense. And I'm glad to hear that you were not only following your dream, but you were following a family pattern, so to speak. Sometimes those
yeah.
are good to do.
Oh yes, yeah.
So when as a great leader and a communicator, how can you communicate without creating more damage? Can you minimize damage with your communications, especially if it's a very high risk situation?
You can. I don't think you're ever going to be perfect at it. You're never going to do that perfectly. You're going to get close to that sometimes, depending on the topic, the situation. Other times, urgency will will create some stumbling in that regard. Now, there's nothing wrong with recognizing when you didn't get it right and coming back later and doing the best you can to repair that. And so that takes quite a bit of self-awareness and emotional intelligence, as we call that nowadays. And so I think that also builds a greater cohesive team when the leader can come back to either the organization at large or the individuals and say, I didn't get that right, or I chose the wrong words, or I threw around a few cuss words that really wasn't appropriate. I should have command of the English language a little bit better than that. So I think being able to admit you're wrong, or you could have done it better, and not apologizing with a but inside there, apologizing, I could have done that better. I think is where we gain a lot of credit and credibility with our team and our leadership style and the way we lead.
Okay, well, we've covered a lot.
Yeah.
I know that, but I'm sure there's something we haven't covered, and there's something you would like the audience to know. What is that?
So one of my passions right now is really defining this process of calling. We love to throw that word around, and you kind of touched on it. You didn't use the word, but you asked me, what brought me to aviation in the Air Force? And so somebody might have said, well, what was your calling? And I like to point out the fact that calling really is just a dream without action. It's it does provide a vision of where you'd like to be one day, but you don't know the timing of that, where you're going to be one day exactly. You don't know the full scope of what that was, where you're going to be from based on that calling. So there's a lot that happens in between that, and it has to do with a series of assignments that creates a readiness state in you that then finally comes to an appointment phase. If you recall the oath of office for officers, I'm sure you've heard it many
Okay.
times. I, Trey Morriss, being appointed a colonel in the United States Air Force, or look at a congressman. The same thing. The word appointed is in all those oaths. It's a different word, but even the oath, even the oath that we use when we get married, have words that sound like appointment and not a dream of a calling or an assignment. Those are in those oaths too. So I take a lot of people through a keynote of that those principles to help them understand there's a difference, and there's a process that goes along with how we go from a calling to that final appointment. And usually it's not a final appointment. It really then it recycles back over again. There are more assignments that bring you to that next appointment part, the chapter in your life. So I've
So we're never done.
you're
Whatever we
never
learn,
done.
we've
So
always got more to learn, right?
I'm really passionate about that topic, and I'm glad you asked me what else do I got to say. Well, I got to say a lot about that. I think that's somewhere we need to really buckle down as a nation and as a military and industry to help people understand that. that just because the CEO stands up on the stage and gives his vision for where we're going as a company, there's a whole lot more to it to get to that final time. That's really where they realize it as an appointment in time that they accomplished that vision.
Sounds good. Well, Trey, it was wonderful talking to you today. This is
Yeah,
Daniel with Act ASAP Podcast, and today's guest has been Trey Morris, the author of Doom 3-4, available on Amazon.
yes, sir.
And Trey, wonderful talking to you. I thank you for your time and your effort and your energy. And we're going to call it a day. We're out.
All right, real pleasure. Thank you.